Professor Zhang Weiwei, it is an honor to be joined by you today. Thank you so much for taking the time out.
With pleasure. Huh?
I want to just introduce you to those who may not know you. Professor Zhang Weiwei, you are a distinguished professor of international relations. You're the director of the China Institute at Fudan University. You worked as a senior English interpreter for Deng Xiaoping and other Chinese leaders during the mid-1980s. And you have a wonderful and best-selling China trilogy, which includes the China Wave, the China Horizon, and the China Ripple, which are all very critical works that everyone should read. But Professor Zhang, I wanted to ask you today about, I cover geopolitics and the major geopolitical questions with a focus on China. And first, let's stick with China and talk about how the United States, where I'm from, portrays China as an aggressor in the South China Sea, the Asia Pacific more broadly. We've seen recent events, encounters with the Philippines, and we hear all the time in the United States, China's military growth is a reason to be alarmed. But you've talked about something called the civilizational state that China represents. Could you talk about what this means and how it aligns or challenges this narrative that we are constantly told in the US?
Okay, thank you, Danny, for your great question. Basically, civilizational states refers to an amalgam of the world's oldest continuous civilization with a super large modern state. And that kind of state has its own traditions and modernity and its own values. For instance, you talk about geopolitics, and you mentioned the case of the Philippines. Let me compare the behavior of China and the United States vis-a-vis this region. When the United States became the world's largest economy, roughly 1890 something, the United States began its war with Spain and then took Cuba and the Philippines into its own hand. It became US colonies. China became the world's largest economy by purchasing power parity in 2014. Over South China Sea, we have been advocating peaceful solution to whatever disputes, even territorial disputes. With the Chinese military power today, we can easily take back all the disputed islands within 24 hours. But we did not do that. We don't do that. We will not do that. We will prefer negotiated solution. Even with regard to the Philippines, despite from Chinese point of view, provocations from the Philippines supported by the United States one way or another, yet we only use water cannons. And China first tested the nuclear explosive in 1964. China immediately made a declaration: China will not be the first to use nuclear weapons. China will not use nuclear weapons against non-nuclear weapon states. So this is from Chinese civilization. Among all the major powers, China had the highest threshold for the use of military force. And we always listen to our ancient wisdom. From Sun Tzu, The Art of War, the first principle is be very cautious about warfare. But on the other hand, we must say very clearly, China also a super modern state with a super modern defense capability. There are very clear red lines, and no country can cross. So this is a situation in China. This is the difference between China and the United States. Come on, United States and China had not fired a single shot over the past 4 decades. United States have been in so many wars, all the time. And United described China as an aggressor. Ridiculous. Yeah.
Well, given that, I think that there's this world landscape that you just laid out, and many view, especially in US foreign policy circles, but now increasingly amongst populations in the West that a U.S.-China war is inevitable. What's your view?
I think, this kind of way of thinking is very much outdated. If you read German philosopher Immanuel Kant, he said basically everything in the end will lead to peace, but only through two ways. One is through wars and wars. The other is through wisdom and through international law. We hope the second approach will work. In the world today, given the whatever circumstances and conditions available, can you imagine two nuclear powers, China and United States, fight with each other and their nuclear collision? And then it will be the end of the world. Everyone knows that. Yeah. So I coined the phrase, why with this what's called the new Cold War? Yeah. The Cold War's premise was mutually assured destruction. What's called the mutually MAD, mutually assured destruction. I created another phrase, a concept called mutually assured prosperity. We should strive for that. Why not? Yeah. Rather than reaching peace through wars, let's reach peace through goodwill, through wisdom, through international laws.
Well, let's take a look now at China's role in some of the major conflicts happening in the world. First, what's happening between Russia and Ukraine, or what many have observed between Russia and NATO. The US has called China a decisive enabler of Russia in this conflict. Could you speak to China's actual position and actions taken now in this war, which is on 2 years now and is not, at least for now, having any kind of...
This particular conflict is a tragedy for China because from Chinese point of view, both Russia and Ukraine are our friends and strategic partners. We signed agreements with both Russia and Ukraine. And so we don't want to see this conflict at all. Yeah. But we have a slightly different position vis-a-vis the West, because we believe this particular conflict was the result of, mainly the result of NATO's 5 expansions. If you look at, you may call wise men from the West, say George Kennan, the Soviet expert who created the containment policy, wise, quote and unquote, he counseled in 1997, please don't engage in NATO expansion. It will cut into Russia's core interests. Then Henry Kissinger, another wise man, quote and unquote, and he counseled NATO not to engage in expansion. He said Ukraine is at the crossroad of civilizations. So Kiev should either be a bridge between the two civilizations or a fortress against, with one civilization pitting against another civilization. It's not a very accurate summary, but basically they have both counseled against NATO's expansion. And people know and knew and know that if NATO constantly expands, and then eventually there will be strong reactions from Russia. Today we realize with these wars going on, Ukraine border to Moscow, 500 kilometers. Of course, Russia got nervous. So I think NATO expansion is to blame, mainly for this. Otherwise, it could have been very different. This is why I think, well, not only me, but also most Chinese feel that NATO is a relic of history. It should come to its end with the end of the Cold War. Yet, mainly due to the United States. And I said the purpose of NATO is keep America in Europe, keep Russia out of Europe, keep Germany down. That's how NATO exists there. It plays this kind of role. And now people even talk about NATO expansion to Asia. China will not allow this to happen, not even once, not to mention 5 times.
Talk about the true nature of the Russia-China relationship, because over this conflict in Ukraine, we've seen this become a huge topic in Western media, and it's often viewed as essentially a negative development. But what is the true character of this partnership?
No, China and Russia are both major powers, and we have very good what we call the strategic partnership for many years. And of this, there is a huge emphasis on bilateral trade, and both economies are hugely complementary. And most Russians and most Chinese have goodwill towards each other. For one thing, because Russia used to be a socialist country, and China for many years regarded Russia, Soviet Union, as our elder brother. This friendship is still there, and people, most Chinese like Putin as well, and he has guts against the United States. People appreciate that. So for all kinds of reasons, it's only normal that China and Russia develop normal relations. But militarily, we are neutral.
Well, let's now take a look at the conflict that is taking the world by storm in West Asia. Worldwide, everyone is watching the events in Gaza, which have just been absolutely devastating. And of course, there's this threat of a broader regional war igniting because of this conflict. China has been very proactive. It has been playing a very active role in this region. Could you talk about its role in this crisis? How does developments like the Beijing Declaration, for example, fit into China's larger foreign policy approach here?
If you look at China's diplomacy, obviously this year there were 2 breakthroughs. One was China good offices as a result, reconciliation between 2 rivals, Iran and Saudi Arabia. And this is very much appreciated across the region. And then you mentioned this Beijing Declaration. It's the result of these meetings in Beijing of 14 factions of Palestinian whatever movements, especially between Fatah and Hamas. So this is very important because China, I said the United States, UK, and some Western countries prefer divide and rule. Chinese philosophy is always unite and prosper. This is from the origin of Chinese civilization. We do this at home with Xinjiang, with other regions. Unite and prosper, unite and prosper. So we want to also promote this in the Middle East. That's how we have done so far, which are on the whole well received. If you look at the words, contents of Beijing Declaration, you can see obviously China is thinking in terms of how to put this 2-state solution into operation. So you have the, let's imagine this conflict will come to an end, say, within 6 months or 1 or 2 years. So post-conflict, there should be united Palestinian government or Palestinian authorities. So now with this agreement, they have agreed to this Palestinian authority as the authority for the whole Gaza Strip as well. So this forward-looking attitude based on unite and prosper and development, I think this is a better solution. As you know a bit about Chinese culture as well, so Chinese philosophy is always what we call the 标本兼治. You should handle, when you faced with a problem, you should handle the issue both its phenomena as well as fundamental solution. Yeah, at two levels. One is to treat individual phenomena, and the other is to treat fundamental cause. So this had to do with fundamental cause. Yeah.
Back in March in 2023, we saw Chinese President Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin have an exchange before Xi Jinping left Moscow. And Xi Jinping said that they were both witnessing changes unseen in a century. Could you talk about what these changes are and where China fits into this?
And this is a very interesting expression. It's used a lot by Xi Jinping and by Chinese, in the Chinese media as well. Because obviously you can see so many changes happening. Some are transformative, some are huge change shifts. And basically another way of describing this is sometimes Chinese also say, you may call it, the relative decline of the West and the rise of the rest. Let me quote this particular comment from EU Foreign Policy Representative Borrelli. He said about 3 or 4 months ago, and he said basically, look at the world, look at the global South. From their point of view, almost everyone believes there is a credible alternative, that is the original word, credible alternative for the global South, economically, politically, militarily, ideologically, etc. All these are changes unseen in past 100 or 200 years. Economically, if you look at the BRICS 10 members, its overall GDP is already larger than G7. Yeah. Militarily, NATO, however pompous, it cannot sustain this particular war in Ukraine. Ideologically, China talks about a shared future for mankind. We have a BRI, which talks about discussing together, building together, benefiting together. And Russia, China, India, and other countries talk about civilizational states. So this is very different from either on the table or in the menu. And technologically, if you look at U.S. trade war and tech war against Huawei, against China, they are losing, obviously. If you look at these microchips, it used to be United States relatively strong in designing, Japan in material, South Korea in memory chips, Chinese Taiwan in testing, and Chinese mainland in marketing, 60% of consumption of chips. Now with this tech war and trade war and chip war, China produces everything on its own. It's not yet completely, but more or less on the way. So, as I said, economically, technologically, militarily, ideologically, there are alternatives now. So alternative, that's important. That's changes unseen over the past hundreds of years.
Indeed, and finally, Professor Zhang Weiwei, on this, I wanted to close on China and the multipolar world, which I think everything that you're talking about fits under. I wanted to ask you about, we have this dynamic. The outgoing Biden administration in the US has just released this nuclear strategy where it is readying for nuclear war, not just with China, but with its so-called adversaries that are close to China. This includes Russia and the DPRK. But I wanted you to talk about, if you could, to close, what does the US and the West get wrong about China's relationships with other nations in this emerging multipolar world? Because as we are being told, it is one that is based on conflict with the U.S., based on conflict with the world. What do you have to say about this?
No, from a Chinese point of view, it is so easy to understand. We can have a win-win. It's so easy because Chinese philosophy, with its long history, is always a win-win. We are very good at win-win. So we can understand why this American mindset is always, I win, you lose. We think it's not sophisticated. And so the United States has to change its mind. And yet, on the other hand, I think, American philosophy is based on this famous phrase, if I can't beat you, I join you. So in the end, through whatever tensions or even hopefully controllable conflicts, and then people reach better understanding of each other. As for this nuclear, this kind of warmongering talk about nuclear conflict, I think it's very, as I said, being such large economies equipped with nuclear weapon, nuclear arsenal, there's no way the two countries can fight each other with nuclear weapon. That will be the end of everyone, if that's the solution you prefer, And as I said, China will not be first to use nuclear weapons. If there will be a war, it will be provocation by the United States. But we have to react strongly. So in the end, it's lose-lose for both, for the whole world. So I said, why not? Let's opt for, rather than mutually assured destruction, let's have a mutually assured prosperity. And we're ready to do that.
Right. I look forward to the day when the United States is ready. Professor Zhang Weiwei, it was wonderful to be with you today. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you.